back to the range, right? So that is a favorable trend. Okay, we're moving towards our targets. All right, this one, 22, so we're both within the range, but this one actually, no, this one dropped out of the range, right? So it was in the range, now it's out of the range. So that's not a favorable trend. So hopefully you can kind of see all the things you kind of have to look at and think about when we're filling out these little charts like this. Okay? It's not super cut and dry. All right. So let's look at 17.2 because it's also vertical analysis. All right. But it's working with the balance sheet. So again, this is vertical analysis. Okay. But this is kind of they call it a solvency because we're looking more about your debts and your assets and to how quickly you could clear out your debt or rectify your liabilities with your assets and that kind of thing. Okay, so they're calling it a kind of a big category, solvency ratio, but what we're really going to look at in a word that you probably either have heard or will heard, especially if you listen to anything financial, is debt ratio. Okay, so for here, what we're going to do is everything's divided by assets. Okay, to figure out our ratios. So again, they've got a lot in here for us already. Of course, total assets is what we're looking at to divide by. So this is the number we're looking at for the current year. Of course, that's 100. So then accounts receivable divided by total assets, that's going to be 8.6% and 9.0%. And then merchandise inventory divided by assets, that's 48.6% and 55%. And let's see, total current assets, again divided by, because we've got total and we've got current, we've got plant, right? So we're going to divide that by the total, and that's going to give us 74.8 and 80.7. And then our plant assets divided by our total assets, that's a 25.2 and a 19.3. Okay, and then we'll move down here, and we're only going to look at total liabilities on this one, but we're still dividing it by total assets. Now granted, this number and these two numbers are the same, right? Okay, but in theory we are dividing it by assets. Okay, so total liabilities divided by total assets is a 22.6 and a 19.9. Okay, and again, this number right here, this is debt ratio. Okay, try to remember that, debt ratio. And then our total stockholders' equity divided by total assets, that is going to be 77.4 and 80.1. Okay, and so just to kind of, I guess I'm going to put it down here, debt ratio is your ability to pay your debt. Okay, all right. Okay, so those are those numbers. Like I said, that's the pretty easy part. Then on the back is when we want to look at the analysis part, right? So again, they've got some things that they want us to look at. They've got some ranges. Again, those ranges can come from historical data. It can come from industry data. Okay, but it's just something that the managers have set down and they've decided this is a good range for us. Okay, if we stay within these ranges, you know, financially we're going to be good. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill in all the numbers, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the ranges and the trends. Okay, so accounts receivable, again, current year, prior year. I'm just going to be pulling them from this side. Okay, so that's where they're coming from. So 8.6%, 9.0, 48.6, and 55. Please use the decimal even if it's a 0. We don't want it to think it's incomplete information. And 80.7, and 25.2, and 19.3, 22.6, and 19.9, and 77.4, and 80.1. Okay. All right, so again, easy, figure out if it's in the range, okay? No, this is not in the range. 50, and we're talking about current year, so 48, nope, still not in the range. 74, yes, it's in the range. 25, yes, it's in the range. 22.6, yes, it's in the range. And 77.4, yes, it's in the range. Okay, so that's the easy part. Now, looking at the trends, again, you need to look and see, is it within the range? Is it going up or down? Should it be going up or down, right? And those kinds of things. And again, read through the book. It talks about unfavorable ratios versus favorable ratios. You can't really base, I'm going to walk through this example, but again, you can't truly base the rest of your answers for the rest of the problems based just off of this. You're going to have to go back and read through and understand what they're telling you in the book. Okay? And because I can't hit every ratio or every possibility that you may come across in the next couple of assignments. Okay? All right. So accounts receivable. Let's look at that. So current year, they are out of range, right? Prior year it was 9, now it's 8.6. We're not even moving towards the range, right? So that should be pretty easy. That is not a favorable trend, right? Okay. Prior year 55. This year's 48. We jumped from the top end of the range to past the bottom end of the range. So that's too big of a jump. And we want, like, accounts receivable, and everything kind of has to be within the range, because you want accounts receivable because it shows that you're making sales, but you don't want too many people to owe you, right? So there's that balance. Merchandise inventory, same thing. You have to keep an inventory, right? You have to have the products available for the people to buy, but you can't keep too much inventory because that's going to cost you too much money. You have to store it and all kinds of things, right? So that's why those ranges are there. And so we moved out of the range there. So that was not a favorable trend. Current assets, we moved, let's see, out of range, into range, and kind of in the middle of the range, so that's a good number. So yeah, I would say that that's a favorable trend. Okay. And total plant assets, we moved out of range from too low, we're moving up, we're kind of right in the middle of the range, So that's a good place. I think that's a good place to be. So yes, that could be a good trend, a favorable trend. Total liabilities. Again, we were out of range. We moved into range. And again, right in the middle of that range. So that, yes, is probably a good thing. Now, you don't notice that total liabilities, it doesn't say 0, right? You're gonna, if you don't have liabilities, that means you're probably not growing. You have to have, like, if you drop down below this range, then that should signal to you that you should go buy something. You should go buy another building, or you should buy a more high-tech piece of equipment because there's new stuff out, right? Your stuff is old if you don't owe money on it anymore, right? So you got to watch that. You don't necessarily want 0 liability, right? Because that is probably a signal that you're becoming stagnant and stale rather than growing and progressing and innovating. Okay? All right. So we don't want that trend to continue. Well, this one was moving up, right? You don't want it to continue at that pace for too long, but just from one year to the next, that was a good trend, right? And that's kind of the general idea for all of this. Just a 1 to 2 year trend, maybe 3. But after that, you don't want that trend to keep going that way because then you will get in trouble. All right, total stockholders' equity. We went from 80 to 77. We were at the high end. Now we're kind of in the middle. Yeah, that's probably fine. Okay, so like I said, it's hard to explain exactly what the right or wrong answer will be on these trends, and that's why I've emphasized, watch the videos. If I have another video up, read through the PowerPoints, read through the chapter, and that's going to be your best bet to kind of understand what the best trend might be. Okay? All right, so that's 7.1 and 7.2.